2023 is firmly set to be the warmest year on record. The series of extreme rainfall events, record-breaking heat waves, and rapidly intensifying cyclones are ominous signals of what this extraordinary warming can do to us. So when 70,000 delegates from nearly 200 countries gather in Dubai this December, they will have the responsibility to take stock of what governments are doing to prevent this disaster from unfolding further. The annual United Nations Climate Change Conference COP28 is happening in Dubai this year from November 30th to December 12th. Why is it important? COP28 will deliver the first report card of climate action. Now, if you recall, in 2015 in Paris, all the countries, including India, agreed to limit the rise in global temperatures this century to 2 degrees Celsius. At the same time, make efforts to limit it to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Despite the commitment, the world has already warmed by 1.1 degrees Celsius, and we are dangerously close to breaching that threshold. In fact, a new UN report from the United Nations finds that the national climate action goals set up by different countries are insufficient to meet the 1.5 degree goal of the Paris Agreement. So at COP28 in December, the same countries will sit down to take stock of what we are really doing to prevent these temperatures from rising further. This is called a global stocktake, which will happen every 5 years to make governments accountable for their actions. Now, once the global stocktake is complete, the countries will have 2 years until 2025 to update their climate targets on how they intend to take stronger action. The GST will focus on 3 things: mitigation, adaptation, and finance. So what are the key decisions that we can expect from COP28? First, fossil fuel phase out. So in COP27 last year, India, which depends on coal to meet 55% of its energy needs, had proposed to expand the previously agreed phase down of coal to include oil and gas, but failed to make it to the final agreement. So it is a big opportunity for nations to now develop some consensus on whether they really intend to phase down all fossil fuels. Second is climate finance. Now, developed countries have so far failed to deliver the $100 billion promised in 2009 to support climate change mitigation and adaptation in poorer nations, which has become an issue in all the climate negotiations. Now, climate finance must be affordable, available, and accessible to all the developing countries. Now, the good thing is that India, under its G20 presidency this year, managed to change this language around climate finance from billions to now trillions for people living in the global south. Now, the New Delhi Declaration that came out in October also noted the need for around $5.8 trillion by 2030 for developing countries to achieve their NDCs. But where is this finance? Now, that will be a discussion at COP28. And the most important point, loss and damage. Now, this is a contentious issue at all the UN climate talks and will be the litmus test for the success of COP28. This is something that the entire global south would be keenly looking forward to. So what is this loss and damage fund? It's basically a new fund that was created to compensate the developing countries to mitigate impacts of climate change, which were made worse by emissions caused by the rich nations. Now, these countries have done little to contribute to climate change, unlike the rich nations like the US, but they are bearing the brunt of these climate disasters. While last year all the countries said yes to the setting up of the loss and damage fund, that was a landmark agreement, but there are still some disagreements among countries on who should contribute most to this loss and damage fund. Now, despite the enormous amount of greenhouse gas emissions, these rich countries are still arguing on why they shouldn't have to pay as much as other countries. Developed countries led by the United States, which is the world's largest historical emitter of greenhouse gases, is now pushing for this fund to be based at the World Bank, a lending institution, which others say should be hosted by the UN agency and should be in the form of a grant funding. Another key development that we can expect at COP28 is tripling of the renewable energy capacity by 2030. Now, 20 of the world's most powerful economies, the G20 nations, including India, China, and the US, had agreed in September to work towards tripling the renewable energy capacity by 2030. Now, but these efforts are subject to national circumstances of each country. Now, this ambitious clean energy push would also take center stage at the COP28, where all the 197 countries would be urged to commit to this target. As part of its NDCs, India has already committed to achieving 50% of its cumulative electric power installed capacity from non-fossil fuel-based energy sources by 2030. Now, it's not really clear about what outcome these rocky negotiations will lead to at COP28, but what is certain is that the world really needs to step up and step up fast to prevent the most vulnerable people from paying the price of climate change. The sense of urgency for ambitious climate action has never been more critical. The latest science from the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has indicated that the greenhouse gas emissions need to be cut 43% by 2030 compared to 2019 levels, and we are severely off track.